Okay, this is the monthly meeting of the Woodbridge Board of Finance. I don't know why it's called the Special Board of Finance meeting, but,
Because we can't,
right,
right,
because it was rescheduled, makes it special.
right.
Okay. So it's a special Board of Finance.
They're
meeting.
all special, Matt.
Thursday, April 24th, 2014. And the first item on the agenda is public comments. And unless our camera people are going to speak, I guess we're going to move on to item 2, which is Mr. Genovese.
Yes. Okay, thank you. We have a monthly report here for the March, the first 3 quarters of the fiscal year. And our projection is a slight surplus of $10,000, a little under $10,000. This doesn't include some funds that will be returning from the Board of Education. So this would most likely go up, depending on ultimately how much they return, but could be, $40,000, $50,000. So I just want to make that note that I don't have that in my analysis, but
Is this from both boards?
no, from Beecher.
From Beach?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Plus, there's some other, but I'm not sure how much it'll be. But I just wanted to make that point.
Okay.
But so the tax revenue is projected for a surplus of about $67,000. We've discussed in the past intergovernmental revenue. We have a town road aid $120,000 surplus, which we received in addition to some shortfalls and some pilot grants. The result is about a $140,000 surplus. We also have a $41,000 revenue sharing grant that we didn't budget for. Department of Revenues experienced a shortfall of a little over $700,000. As you all know, most of those are from golf revenues. We do have a slight surplus of about $59,000. In certain categories, conveyance fees, town clerk fees, zoning permits are all trending ahead of budget. So those are helping to offset those golf revenues a little. We have actually received some revenue from locker rentals and a few other minor revenues have come in since this was printed, about $8,000. So there's actually some golf revenues this year, mostly locker rentals and that sort of thing.
That's great.
So that's great. Also, interest rates are about $20,000 deficit there. Country Club of Woodbridge is projected to experience a surplus of about $365,000. I know we've gone over that in the past, and that's a combination of the first 6 months of the Billy Casper contract, but since we've capped our liability on that, and we no longer have that exposure to those expenditures or revenue issues, the second half of the year is our contribution for Billy Casper and also some clubhouse expenses. The center building is probably have a surplus of about $15,000, largely due to savings in natural gas. We saved quite a bit of money in the center from our conversion to natural gas. That was one of our largest users. Police officer overtime, about $58,000 over budget, largely due to a shortage in personnel. But we're monitoring this with the chief, and we believe at this point there's a surplus in wages to help assist in covering that shortfall. So at this point, we don't believe it will be necessary but to go outside their budget, but we will continue to monitor that. Should that come up, we'll let you know.
Tony, if a police officer works these other, extra jobs, guiding traffic and all,
Right.
is that ever an overtime situation, or is
No.
it like a flat rate for the job?
But what happens is we have a special revenue fund called private duty. And in that special revenue fund, we book the overtime as an expense, so it's not in the general fund. And then when then we bill whoever it is, and the revenue comes back in that fund. And then we also charge an admin charge. And the revenues offset the expenditures. We have a bad debt allowance. We book a 5% bad debt allowance for bad debts. And then the rest of the admin revenue comes back to the general fund, and you've seen it in our transfers, and it's private duty transfers in. As a matter of fact, it says it. Does it say it on here? There's a $30,000 budget there, but this year maybe closer to $60,000, just due to activity. Just all depends on how much activity there is.
So this never costs the town anything?
Never.
This extra
Private duty never costs the town anything.
Okay. Somebody asked me that. I thought that was the answer, but I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you.
And we have a good, we stay on top of our collections, and we're, so that's never an issue.
I noticed yesterday I had to drive to Seymour to see a client, and it seemed like everywhere I went, they're trimming trees. So I guess that's underway. 'Cause
Oh,
I got stuck at the beginning of Seymour Road in Woodbridge, and the Woodbridge Police were
So there's
down.
probably private duty for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I went further, I went into Oxford, and in Oxford, they were blocking off the road, they were trimming trees, so.
They weren't trimming trees in Woodbridge, though.
Mhm.
Well, that might be something else, because they weren't supposed to start in Woodbridge until June or July.
I don't know if it's
Was it the
UI.
regular
Maybe it's
trimming
maybe it's
program, or maybe
something
it's
else.
I
the
don't know if it
regular
was
maintenance?
UI, it was that tree company we've all heard of. But it was, in other words, when you take that left onto 67,
From 63?
yeah, right there on the left. there.
Oh, that might have to do with that construction project that's
Okay.
going on. Okay,
So, Matt, actually, to the contrary, the private duty doesn't cost us money. As a matter of fact, we can collect $40,000 a year,
Oh, okay.
$50,000 a year.
Is that on the admin fee?
Yeah, and it helps to offset the gas that's used, the car. There's a car, we charge a car fee. You know, we collect all of our expenses.
Okay.
It's waste management, $55,000 surplus due to some tonnage surpluses there. And employee benefits, a surplus of about $65,000. So all in all, aside from the golf course, we're doing well this year.
And the Woodbridge Board of Ed, I guess Sandy, you'll cover that anyway, right? But
I will.
we've done a lot of work with them to explain this to us. And as I said at the meeting the other night, they were very cooperative this year in keeping our numbers down. Okay, funding requests, there are a couple. Both line item transfers. And the first, I read through it, and I think it's a very worthwhile, was that the first one? Yeah, it's worthwhile, and that's to put recycle bins at the ball fields and parks, so that perhaps people aren't going to be throwing bottles and cans, and we can recycle them. So this is a $3,000 transfer from bulky waste into recycling at the various ball fields and parks. So I'll move acceptance of line item transfer 1314-23 in the amount of $3,000.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye? Okay. And second is an annual $3,000 donation from the Woodbridge Fathers Baseball League to help us offset the costs of some overtime for toilets, et cetera, when they have tournaments and use on the ball field. So, again, this is just, I guess, getting the revenue into the proper line item. So I'll move acceptance of line item transfer 1314-24 in the amount of $3,000.
Second.
Any discussion on this?
Yes, so I read this as a substitution of the use of the funds. In other words, they're not, originally they gave us the funds for the clay, the sand, right, and they want to now have us use that to provide toilets, basically.
So we use it for,
Right.
yeah, so we used to use it for clay, and then we would have expenditures every year for the overtime and the toilets for the tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did in the past was that we use some of the funds for, depending on, what the expenditures are, for overtime and for, the toilets, and the rest for the clay. So it's
Okay.
still, so we get less clay essentially.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
and you're
right.
absolutely
But
right.
it's not going to be any increase in terms of what we have to cover, it's just using it for different.
Correct,
Something that we
right.
would cover anyway.
That's right,
Okay,
yeah.
As long as that's clarified, that's fine.
Okay, any other questions? All those in favor? Aye? Okay. And next, minutes, lots of minutes. Okay, the first minutes are from the December 3rd, 2013. I believe this was capital budget presentations. And I'll move acceptance of the minutes of the special joint Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen meeting on December 3rd, 2013.
Second?
Okay. Any corrections, adjustments, et cetera? Hearing none? Yep.
I'm sorry. I was just reading this and regarding the radios for the police station. Was the last radio project done in 2013? Using a 10-year bond?
Where's that, Karen?
On page
2003.
2005.
Oh,
You got that, Karen? Anything else? All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Next is the second capital budget presentation meeting of the Boards of Finance and Selectmen on December 5th, 2013. And I will move acceptance of the minutes of the joint Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen meeting of December 5th, 2013.
second.
Okay, any discussion, corrections, adjustments? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Okay, next is the first budget hearing, which is January 23rd, 2014. Again, it was a joint Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen meeting, and I'll move acceptance of the minutes of the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen meeting on January 23rd, 2014.
Second?
Any corrections? All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Next was the next joint Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen budget meeting on January 28th. And I will move acceptance of the January 28th minutes as presented. Any corrections to these? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Okay. And the final joint Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance budget meeting was on January 30th. And I'll move acceptance of the minutes of January 30th as presented.
Second?
Any adjustment to these? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. And finally was the Board of Finance regular monthly meeting on March 20th, 2014. That was, of course, the meeting where Andy made the presentation. So I'll move acceptance of the minutes of March 20th, 2014 as presented.
Second.
Any corrections to these? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Next is review of the public hearing discussion. As I said earlier when I came here, I think if we eliminated the various people who were there from boards and commissions, there were probably 10 people there, which Ed Sheehy, he always told me that was a sign that people are approve of the job we're doing and of where we're at, so I'll go along with that. There were a few points made, of course. One was made about the fund balance. I think we're keenly aware of the fund balance and keeping it where it should be, although, again, I don't know that 10% is necessarily in this day and age an absolute.
It's not. The fund balance is designed, it's very specific to each town's specific circumstances. And it's designed for to mitigate risks and to, as best you can, be prepared for expenditures that come up that you did not anticipate, as we had. There are both sides to this argument, as you've heard. There are some that say that too high a fund balance means that you're overtaxing people. We've heard that a lot.
Michael Luther.
Michael Luther was a big one of
an
that.
advocate of that.
Yeah.
And by the way, Michael was unable to attend the other night, which broke his string of, I forget
Yeah, right.
how many years he's been there. He's been there, buddy.
So you want to balance. The idea is to balance the fund balance based on what your circumstances are, and we currently have a policy here of between 7% and 14%, and we're at between 9.5% and 10% at the moment. So I think we're within that range, and that's what they'll look at. They also look at other items. To just think that fund balance alone is an indicator of your fiscal health is not the case. It's a very complicated discussion that involves ability to pay, which is your wealth levels, your willingness to pay, or your tax collection rate. There's a whole series of your capital plan, your planning, management. There's a whole series of things that go into it. So just to pick that one thing out is not
It's
really
never one
never,
factor
never,
that is looked at.
never.
Right.
So I want to just sort of share something with you that I thought was interesting. Over the last 3 years, 12, 13, and 14, and I picked those years because that's sort of when we got involved with Billy Casper. Operationally, and that's including this year, we had budgeted $400,000 each of those years from fund balance. Plus, we lost about $800,000 in the golf course. That's $2 million. Over those 3 years, you know how much we actually dropped in our fund balance? It was $300,000.
Really?
Yes. So what that tells you is that you all realized that we had a problem, and we saved where we could. We didn't spend where we didn't have to spend. We saved our contingency. I thought that was an interesting fact.
Yeah, over a 3-year period, that's
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
Yeah. And we had cooperation, boards of ed
Yeah.
were helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a team effort. So I just thought you'd find that
You know,
interesting.
just obviously, you know, again, when our fund balance was 11%, we had several people screaming at us.
We did.
To take that money and just reduce taxes in
We
one
did.
year.
Yep.
And we said, look, we're on a consistent 400,000 approximately year after year. And to suddenly do 800,000, what happens the following year when you can't replicate that? Now
Right.
you've got an 800,000 or $400,000 tax increase.
Right.
So we were never too bad. And we also said we have to be ready for a situation where we might need the money,
Which we did.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. So I think I'm perfectly satisfied. 10% is not the benchmark, I don't believe. I think it's probably more like, I wouldn't want to see it go below 9 if we
Right.
could. And
Agreed.
but
I agree.
think, like you said, 7 to 14
That's
is
our,
still
our
healthy.
current range, and that's
When you consider there's a lot of towns, New Haven, for example,
Right.
has zero fund balance.
right. Right.
And West Haven
has negative fund
minus
balance.
fund
Right.
balance.
Right.
And I think you go right through. I think, again, 9.5% is certainly a healthy
That's why I
number.
think our auditors reports are very important.
Right.
And somehow they, we see those but, when you take a look at our auditors reports over the last 3 or 4 years, they're very, very good. Okay? And you look at the health of our town compared to the health of the towns around us. And they talked about our fund reserve, and he said the fund reserve, we were right in.
We had adequate levels.
We had adequate levels,
Yeah.
so.
I'm actually just very impressed that over the 3-year period of time, that's the level of fluctuation. Given what we had to go through in terms of the purchase and the upkeep related to the golf course.
It's actually in the it's in the budget here it's one of the charts in the budget. Towards the end, it shows the actual losses and surpluses over the past 10 years. And so you can see it right in there. Yeah.
One of the things that I learned going through the process with Tony and seeing the audit report and how complimentary it was, and of course we received an award for it. The one concern that stood out was the unlimited liability that we faced at the Country Club of Woodbridge.
Right.
And that's why that became such a top priority, at least for me, when I saw that, to renegotiate the contract, so that we now are obligated only for a sum certain. And we've addressed the concern.
We have a rating review every time we issue notes with Moody's, and both times it's come up. And our general make sure you have addressed this at some point. It wasn't a major concern at that point, but it was just brought up as this is something you should think about controlling in the future.
And
So that's what we
we've done
did.
it, so
Right.
we did.
And I think we continue to show great stewardship over all assets and maintaining reasonable maintenance plans on anything. So many people allow to go, and once things start to deteriorate, the escalation of deterioration just goes so much that people just can't keep up, and that happens so rapidly. So people might look around and say things are good, why don't you take a little less? But things remain good because you have that constant plan. And it saves money in the long run.
Which probably is leads me to the other statement that was made towards the end of the meeting. The Republican Town Committee handed out this little piece of paper, which basically says that Woodbridge spends, well, it's not what it says, but Chuck Pine, who presented this, said we spend too much money. And Tony and I have, Chuck Pine sent me all the backup for this, and Tony and I, when I get some time, are going to spend some time going through the numbers, because I find it hard to believe that we're at 2,144 per capita, and he excluded education in this, and so I don't know what the impact of that is, but we're going to go through some of these and see exactly where the numbers come from.
I just wanted to make a comment. It's because each town is different, it's a very complicated analysis to try and compare towns. I'll give you an example. I just briefly looked at one town on here, which was Weston. And this was just a cursory look, and I didn't sort of come up with a final figure, but the town budget that was used for Weston, Weston has their solid waste and their youth services off budget. Their special revenue funds, most of it. So they collect revenue in, you mentioned revenue, and then they, just like we have a private duty. Some people have private duty on their general fund. Some people have town road aid off their general fund. I mean, everyone does it a little different. So to just take that one number is not necessarily an accurate representation. The other thing that they don't have in their town budget, which is separate, is Board of Education debt service and Board of Education capital expenditures, which is a lot of money.
Right.
So you have to make sure that you have an apples to apples comparison.
Exactly.
It's the same problem with saying the per pupil cost.
That's a
for
similar,
education
similar
is,
circumstance, right?
It's one number to one number, but what goes into that is so different, and it's very, very hard
Right.
to compare.
Those are all acceptable accounting procedures, Tony, to
Absolutely.
have it off budget or on
Sure,
budget?
it's called
just-
special revenue fund. If you collect a special revenue for a special purpose, you can have a special fund for it.
But you don't have to.
But you don't have to,
Thanks.
right?
I think also the difference in terms of the towns that were on that sheet is that, the commercial districts are not comparable at all between these towns in terms of what can be collected in terms of other sources of revenue to offset, resident taxes. The other thing is that there's over 55 housing, there's condominiums. I mean, we don't have that in Woodbridge, and we did propose that as a solution to some of our fiscal issues, and that was rejected by the residents. So we have tried to actually do the same thing that these other towns have done. Maybe timing is everything. Maybe people are willing to consider that again. But that factors into what the taxes are that need to be raised.
Well, that was one of the questions I raised. What about revenue? I'm not talking about revenue, I'm talking about expenditures. I like to see both, there was a claim made in the last, before the last election, that our expenditures went up 33% in 3 years or something. And of course, they had included all the country club expenditures in there, but not the exact same number for revenue on the other side. So while expenditures went up 33% and revenue went up 33%, you just can't look at half the equation. So again, as soon as I get caught up at the office, Tony and I are going to sit down and go through some of these. Now, Bethany, okay, again, without even knowing, Bethany is less. Well, Bethany doesn't have a finance director. Bethany doesn't have a lot of things. They don't have a police department.
Right.
So, I mean,
Right,
Let's-
that's a good
let's look
example.
at that.
Bethany doesn't have a police department, right?
Huh?
They don't have a police
No, they
department,
don't.
right?
They don't have a police department, or they don't have a finance director.
And they just had to borrow, $6 million for their roads? So they, obviously.
So that's a good example. That's very good, yeah.
Well,
So they're borrowing for their roads.
The
as
chairman,
opposed
the
to-
chairman of the Board of Finance in Bethany, who serves with me on the Amity Finance Committee, was put in like 75 hours putting together his presentation for the budget hearing the other night, because they don't have a finance director. So I said, I'm glad you're doing it, because I wouldn't do that. 75 hours, I would not do that, so. But I think more than that, again, I don't know if Chuck made a remark that Ansonia cut taxes this year. I honestly, taking nothing away from Ansonia, I'm sure it's a fine community. I don't know that we should be comparing ourselves to Ansonia when I know their educational system is in shambles over there. They've had a lot of problems. But I look around at this town, and if you were going to cut this budget and spend less, let's be honest about it, it's Beecher. We can't affect Amity unless it gets voted down. How much are we going to cut from all these other small budgets? We're going to start, and that's something I am not comfortable. I doubt anybody here is comfortable. I'm not going to tell them how to educate the kids in this town. That's there, and to just start slamming the educational system. But if you look at the service again, I've said it many times. Not that I go up to the transfer station very often, but you go up there and it's such a professional operation. They help you if you have a problem, that it's well worked. I've been to other town waste, oh my God, I mean, it's disgusting. You have to wear rubber boots if you go in there. It's, our public works, I mean, what Karen said, we put money into roads every year. Drive around, I drive around in all the towns. My office is in Hamden. I mean, the street my office is on, it's disgusting. You can't, when I come down the street, there's a sinkhole in the middle of the street. You call up and they don't even come to fix it. And this, New Haven, forget it. If you drive through New Haven, West Haven, I mean, our roads are in phenomenal shape.
I mean, I think we have agreed between the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and the residents of the town. There's a certain infrastructure that we want our municipal government to provide, and it does do that. And that would be significantly compromised if we start cutting, in various different places. And I don't think that that's really what the town residents want.
I agree, and I think that's what we're responding to. I think if people were upset with a 2.37 we're at?
Yeah, 2.4, yeah.
Yeah, they'd be at the meeting, screaming and yelling that I can't afford another $200 a year in taxes. I know it's a little bit every year, but I just think people in this town have come to expect a certain level of service and a certain level of performance. And
But the other point is for how many years in a row have we been around or less than 1%, which you couldn't even find in other towns?
I was concerned about this year because I knew Amity was going to come in with a bigger number,
Right.
which they did, but then I'll tell you a story about that in my liaison report. I knew Beecher wasn't going to come in with a zero like they did last year. And yet again, as I said the other night, Beecher really came through for us because as they saw their surplus grow, that only helped them to pay off certain items that were in our budget, but also caused them to lower their budget. Then I knew we had the first payment on the Public Works bond issue. We still have the payment on the Country Club bond issue, so I thought it was going to be, I was hoping we could get it below 4, and to get it into below 2.5,
Yeah.
I think is quite an accomplishment, so. But we'll look at this, and we'll see if it's, again, Betsy was up there, Betsy Quist, our assessor, and she's saying Route 1. In other words,
Yeah,
all the commercial, I mean, you talk about a town like Madison, they have a tremendous amount of commercial.
Matthew, I wouldn't knock myself out.
Yeah.
I think that, I think we know, if we have to take a look, I think that one of the areas that we can reduce expenditure and cost and reduce a risk, I think we're focused on that, and that's the Country Club. We have to resolve that.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think if there's anything we have to, that's an Achilles tendon that has to be resolved, I said, that's it. So, and that's what we're doing. I mean, I think there's a huge effort, and I think that the taxpayers of the town of Woodbridge will have an opportunity, no matter what proposals are made, they will be able to vote on it and tell the selectmen and tell the Board of Finance and tell everybody and all the commissions what they want to do. I think that's the direction we're going in, so. The fact of the matter is that we must continue to support our infrastructure. For us not to do that, we're not good stewards of what we have.
That is correct.
It's easy to do that in the short term, but in the
Yes.
long term, it really.
We're not being good stewards,
Right.
and we have to be good stewards. That's our responsibility. We have a responsibility to the taxpayers, and we have a responsibility to the children that attend school in this town.
Right.
And and we have to do that, and we continue to do it. So, so I think that
I'm just interested, to be honest with you.
I understand. I'm just
Yeah,
saying that
more of an interest I
Right,
have. in-
but pick one or two, look at that,
And if we're-
and
we're-
then,
I mean, to go, yeah, I mean, we will. Tony already, like I said, we already started looking at it, and there's a few discrepancies. And again, I want to see if where the Woodbridge number comes from, but again, I think people are basically satisfied with where we're at with this town, and I know I am. My taxes go up like everybody else's, and I'm more than willing to pay it, especially when I see what's going on in the school systems. And I think another indication that people aren't dissatisfied was the Beecher Road bond, the largest bond issue in the history of this town.
that's amazing.
And the first time I can remember a bond issue being approved on the first vote.
Yep.
So I don't know if there was a lot of people out there spreading negativity about it, and yet it still passed. So I think people in this town realize that it's a great time. I'm proud to tell people I live in Woodbridge. So, but we're going to still take a little bit of a peek at it anyway.
Okay.
Just
Can't resist.
It's just I can't
You
resist.
can't resist.
I can't resist. I got to see what. I just can't believe it, to be honest with you. So we'll see. Especially Orange, I don't know. But again, look at Orange has gotten away with the tax base, so. Okay, but we'll report back to you. Tony and I we like getting together for stuff like that. All right, Tony, recommendation of the town meeting. There's some items here that we have to go for that.
There are
will bring
four.
the,
Yep.
right.
There are four recommendations for you to consider for changes to your budget. First is a decrease of $50,000 in the capital budget for Board of Education Technology, which would lower the crest from $95,000 to $45,000. They do have some surplus funds in their remaining budget, which they would like to spend on that to reduce our budget. Second is the Amity budget, which was, as Matt has spoken to about many times, was reduced after you met last, and that's a reduction of $146,048. Third is waste disposal tipping fees, and we are currently in negotiations for contract negotiations with part of the regional group. There's 8 towns maybe, and so the tip fee there is going to be about $8, $6 to $8 less than what we had budgeted. So there's a savings there of about $23,000. And finally, the golf course amount was off by $5,000, so I increased that to $195,000, which is where the agreement is. In addition to that, there were some minor changes from the Board of Assessment Appeals, so I had to decrease the grand list by about $195,000, which is not much considering how large the grand list is, but they were all minor in nature, but I made those changes also.
So can we just have one motion to cover these?
Yes, so the revised mill rate is 34.97, which is 2.43%.
And that's what's on the sheet. You've made those
Correct,
changes.
right. I made the changes on this sheet so you can see them all
Okay.
in the,
So let's see if I can make a motion to cover all this. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to make a motion that we approve a recommendation for the town meeting for expenditures in the amount of $45,502,190, which will result in a mill rate of 34.97, which is a 2.43% variance to the 13-14 budget.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. I could tell you that one of the things I was going to tell you when I sent in my liaison, Amity was pretty adamant about their budget being what it was, and I had told them that you got to be prepared to have this thing pass. So, and so at the next finance meeting, when they came through with this is way more than I was looking for, $300,000,
right.
which would have given us $100,000, and they
Right.
came up with all this. And Jamie Sterling, who was the chair of finance, said, when we got the feeling that Woodbridge might be against us, he said, we better change, because if there's anybody that supports Amity, it's Woodbridge. So he said, we heard you, and they didn't do anything very painful. There was some more revenue they could recognize, and there wasn't a whole lot of expenses that they cut. So I think this, as I said to them, I said, I can't imagine not supporting this, but Orange voted against it again. So we'll see. I understand one of the members of the Orange Board of Finance is actually calling people in Bethany, trying to
About the revised budget?
trying to convince them to vote against the. And I guess Jerry Gorski got some phone calls from people. They were offended by this, and so I know who it is. He's a long-time proponent that Amity is spending too much money. Okay, so that's all set. Ellen, first selectmen's report.
Thank you. Just a few things I'd like to mention. First is I want to be sure everyone knows, everyone who's watching and everyone here, that we now have a Facebook page for the town of Woodbridge. Please like us and follow us. It's a great way for us to get information out to people about what's happening. And in a very short time, we had over about 120 friends So it's a good solid start, but we need a few more. Andy, I know you're going to like us on Facebook. We are working very hard to find as many means of communication to people and really get the word out about all that's going on. We've already mentioned the preliminary budget hearing, and I want to thank Tony so much and Tony's department for all the work and putting everything together so beautifully. Karen.
She puts most of the document together, so without Karen, we wouldn't have a document.
It was really so impressive, Karen. And you know, having gone through the budget process for the first time myself, I was just so impressed by how well things work and how people pitch in together. And as you've been saying, that what a great town it is, and the very high quality of the work that we do. So, Tony, thank you. And
And I
Karen,
think,
it was really
I think your presentation, followed by Tony's, pretty much answered a lot of questions that people would have, so I thought it was very, I thought it was
I think it was an
Yeah,
informative,
it was
very
very good.
informative evening.
a lot of good information came out before the discussion opened up.
Right, and
So-
the presentation is on the website, so we do have the PowerPoint on the website so people can take a look at it. One of the things in the presentation, which I don't have with me, is a listing of upcoming events over the next few weeks, and I would encourage everyone to look at that. We're having, United Illuminating is coming to talk about the tree trimming program. We're having the charrette for the Plan of Conservation and Development, which is like an all-day workshop on May 17th. Next week, there's a meeting on the construction going on at the intersection of Route 63 and 67. That's Tuesday evening. So all of this is on the website, and I think it would be really important for people to take a look. The other thing is, I do want to mention that the Inland Wetlands Commission and the Woodbridge Volunteer Fire Department have come to an agreement with respect to the ongoing dispute. And both commissions worked so hard and diligently to make this happen. They did it under the auspices of court mediation, non-binding court mediation. They met before a Superior Court judge on 2 occasions. And although on the first occasion it didn't look like it was going too well, they really put their major differences aside to come to an agreement, and that will be presented to a judge next week for approval. And I think the Board of Selectmen approved the agreement as well, and we'll be getting some more word out about the details of it. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding and confusion about the dispute and also about the resolution, because as soon as the document came out that they had agreed to, there was some misinformation put out immediately. So just a couple of things I'd like to mention about it. One is that the agreement does not require any payment whatsoever by the town of Woodbridge. The items that are in the agreement, there's going to be some moving of portions of the patio, plantings, a new fence is going to be built, and other things. All of the work will be done by the Woodbridge Volunteer Fire Department. And in addition, they'll be purchasing planting materials, and they're obligated to spend up to $500 on the materials, but the work will be done by them. So it's a very, it's a real compromise. You know, both sides felt so strongly about the merits of their case. These are very difficult cases with respect to after-the-fact permits, and it was really in the best interest of the town to resolve it. The other thing is that because this was 2 agencies, the town was responsible for the attorney's fees for both parties. And the fire department's attorney had been working pro bono, but if it continued and there were appeals, it's very likely we would have had very significant fees. We already paid quite a bit. So these 2 commissions worked very hard in the interest of the town, and I want to recognize them and thank them for that.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, liaison reports. We had an Amity meeting Monday night. Nothing earth-shattering going on. The only thing I could report, aside from the fact that the new superintendent is certainly starting to understand the budget, and he came in March, which is not easy. So, as we know, they did reduce their next year's request, which helped us. The only other thing I'd report is that the Woodbridge Public Schools have requested that they could use Amity this summer for their summer programs, and it appears as though they're going to work it out.
Yep.
And they're not going to charge them for the space, but they are going to be responsible for custodians and obviously for obvious stuff. And there even seems to be, on the superintendent's part anyway, some um, uh, um, the acceptance of the fact that perhaps it might cost Amity a little money, but it's good for community relations, et cetera. So it's going to work out, which I know Dr. Stella was very concerned about. And they're definitely going to work it out, and I don't see that being a problem at all. So beyond that, there was nothing more to report.
What is the sense, Matt, of when they'll make a decision about the microgrid? Since we can't really proceed
I don't know
without
about
them.
that. They didn't even discuss that.
There was a meeting, I think they had a meeting last week on the microgrid, maybe it was a special meeting, and there were some questions that the board is going to be answering, that the staff is answering for the board, and hopefully they'll be getting back to us in the next week or two, because the microgrid is based largely at the high school and benefits the high school. About 70% of the
70%,
project
yeah.
is for the benefit of the high school. So we really can't proceed until the Amity Board of Education is on board. But I'm optimistic that they will get there and it won't be too long. Yeah.
Karen, do you have anything?
No, I wasn't able to go to the.
Okay. Andrew?
We had a meeting,
Oh, good.
and Ellen was there.
Really?
Ellen came to the meeting. She tried to get out, but she couldn't get out. A lot of these meetings are, they end up in executive session because a lot of it is personnel stuff. So, but their budget, their budget, they're doing well in the budget, but overtime is still their problem. They're running overtime, and the reason they're running overtime, they still have 2 men out on disability. But we had the opportunity to meet one of the new recruits who finished his 27 weeks. A new officer, Matthew Iannucci, who is, I guess, officially out of training and is taking. So that'll help this overtime situation. What else? The only thing is, activity was the one in the activity reports, though. There's a lot going on in town. I mean, one of the we talk about. We had another bank robbery in town. We had another bank robbery. A TD Bank was, and the activity reports are very, very active. And so, we talk about, we're talking about the need for our police department sizing and everything else. Well, we seem to have, this area is a very active area because of its location. So that's and more of that, and I think more of that will come out in the future. So that was basically it for the report for the information I could share with you.
Thank you, sir. David, anything?
This is the last one.
Okay. Sandy?
All right, the Library Commission met on Monday, April 7th, and the library has been extremely active in terms of programs. I continue to be very impressed. The Reading Together program, which is between the high school students and the elementary school students, there are more than 26 of the teens participating in this, which is really phenomenal in terms of the relationship between the high school students and the Beecher students. Still having an issue with the C-card deliveries, and they're really trying to coordinate fixing this problem with some of the other libraries. 4 films were shown during the month. There was an art studio exhibit from Palette Art Studio, and right now there's the Amity High School student exhibit in the library, which is very impressive. There were 5 programs that were held. 204 people attended those. There was a college savings workshop. There was the Cary Boys in concert. There were 2 college entrance practice exams. So, the library is really making a huge effort to appeal to all ages of residents and provide programming, and I think it's been very successful. They use MailChimp to send out their newsletter, and they now have 120 subscribers, and keeps going up in the range of 15 to 20 per month. Todd did actually propose slightly changing the hours for the library in the summer, and the commission actually asked him to really rethink that. because they didn't want him to change the hours in the summer and then switch back to different hours starting in September. So they're going to take that up again at the next meeting.
Sandy, I was
Yes.
in the library the other day, and they're doing a survey.
Right.
They have, asking people just to see how they feel about it. and
Exactly,
opine about it.
exactly, right. And the commission basically asked Todd to do that. So hopefully he'll bring back that information in terms of what do the patrons really want. And then the commission can make some decision. They are having a PEEP diorama contest. This is actually for all ages. And
It's unbelievable.
yeah, and they're just very creative in terms of how to appeal to the community. And they are actually going to have a beer program with the New England Brewing Company in terms of learning about the process and what do you do for home brewing. This is going to be in May.
Sampling?
But yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, I mean, this is a happening place, the library.
You're in a peep show.
Yeah, right. Actually, I didn't write down what that stood for, but it was actually, it's pretty cute in terms of, kids of all ages and adults too can actually enter this contest where you create a diorama. All right, the Woodbridge Board of Ed Finance Committee also met that same evening. And just to clarify what you were talking about, Matt, in terms of where the programs will go over the summer, the high school will house the summer enrichment program that they have, and then the preschool and the special ed programs will be at Ezra. So it really does show a tremendous amount of community cooperation in terms of really enabling them to continue to run their programs at really very little cost. A lot of time was spent going over the year-end surplus spending recommendations, and you've already mentioned, Tony, about the change in terms of lowering their budget and contributing to purchasing materials that they need for next year, including the additional classrooms that they have to start up, and that's furniture and instructional materials in addition to the technology and some of the kitchen equipment. What they're estimating at this point is that there will be somewhere between $28,000 and $36,000 to return back to the town. It will just depend upon how the year ends up, but it will probably be no less than the $28,000. So, and again, extremely transparent, open for discussion, transparent with the board, transparent with the town, and that really has a lot to do with Dr. Stella and Al Pulo. So.
We finally have a Board of Education and Administration that realizes we're all on the same page.
Right.
We're not out to get anybody, but let's be fair to the taxpayers.
Well, and I think the amazing part of this also is that, the demographics are starting to turn around. And for the last couple of years, we've had an increased number of students in the school. And I think that trend is going to continue as the older residents of the town are selling their homes, and the people who are going to move in are young
And
families.
they're going to Orange for 55 and over housing, by the way.
Correct. So I would love to see us have 55 and over housing so that our Woodbridge
No-brainer.
residents can stay here and
And it's not happening down in the lower Woodbridge. It's not happening.
no.
And that is not what people want, the 3-story, 1-car garage underneath
No.
type of buildings. They want like an Orange, all on one level with upstairs
Correct.
for your
And
kids.
it's unfortunate. I mean, that's privately owned land, and we can't really control what's done except for, reacting to a proposal based on zoning.
Yeah.
And this is the land that we do own, and we can actually do something about. So,
I found one woman came up to me after the meeting, and I found her, she said, I come to all these meetings and I want to speak, she said, but I'm so intimidated by the people who speak, so I just can't get up there and speak, she said, but, I realize what you're doing and I approve what you're doing, but it's very hard when you got people with all these facts and just to get up there and state your case, so.
yes.
But,
Timing
we'll
is
find out.
everything,
Yeah,
and
we'll
maybe
find out.
now's the right time.
Yeah,
So.
we'll find out, so. Okay, anything else? Okay, motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.